Hello everyone, and welcome to the Introduction to Research Method in Psychology, Model 3. This time, I would like to talk with you about ethics. If you will ask a psychologist who are doing research, which part of the research they like the least, I'm pretty sure they will answer an ethic application. Creating an ethic application takes a lot of effort and time. It is also the least creative part of the research. But why then universities want us to spend so much time and effort on such a boring task? Because psychology has a history of research that lacks of morality. Let's start with two historical examples. The first example is Tuskegee study. I am very sorry if I pronounce the name wrongly. The Tuskegee study was conducted in the US, Alabama. The researchers wanted to study the effects of untreated syphilis on the men's health over a long term. Syphilis is an infection caused by bacteria. It most often spreads through sexual contact. It can also be passed to a baby during pregnancy and childbirth, and sometimes through breastfeeding. Without treatment, syphilis can damage the heart, brain, or other organs. It can also become life-threatening. Nowadays, early syphilis can be easily treated with an antibiotic called penicillin. But in the 1930s, syphilis was cured using infusions of metals, and this cure had very serious side effects. 600 black men participated in Tuskegee's study. 400 of them were already infected with syphilis, and about 200 were not. The men were recruited in their community churches and schools, and many of them were very enthusiastic about participating in this study. The problem is, there is little evidence that the men were told that the study was actually about syphilis. Infected men were told that they had bad blood instead of syphilis. They were required to come to the Tuskegee Clinic for evaluation and testing, but they were never given any treatment. Researchers actively lied to those men. For example, when the researcher decided to conduct a very painful and potentially dangerous spinal tap procedure on every participant, they promoted as a special free treatment for their illnesses. A spinal tap procedure wasn't a treatment. It was just used in order to follow the progression of the syphilis. In 1943, penicillin, an antibiotic, was approved for treating syphilis. Of course, as each medication, penicillin have some side effects, but their amount was much less in comparison to previous treatment or not treatment. The Tuskegee Institution decided not to provide this information to their subject. Since the majority of the Tuskegee study participants was not able to write and read, they had no other possibility to know about the new cure. The study conducted till the 1972 and was closed only because a whistleblower gave the information to the Associated Press. Over those years, many of those men got much sicker, their life quality got worse, and many of them transmitted the disease to their partners and children. Only in 1974, when many of the subjects already died, they reached a settlement from the US government. A formal apology waited for them for the next 20 years. In 1997, President Bill Clinton formally apologized to the survivors on behalf of the nation. As a result, African Americans turned very suspicious of government health services and research participation. I am pretty sure none of you thinks that this study was conducted ethically. There are three main points about this study showing how unethical it was. The participants were not treated respectfully. The researcher lied to them about the nature of the study, were not telling them about the available new cure for the syphilis. And doing so, they did not give the participants a chance to make a fully informed decision about the participation in this study. Maybe some of them will still participate in this study, even if they know that there will be no cure available. The participants in this study were harmed. They were not told about easy cure with penicillin and lived their life suffering from the symptoms of the syphilis disease. They were also subjects of painful and dangerous tests. And third, researchers targeted a disadvantaged social group. Syphilis affects people from all social backgrounds, but the researcher chose to target a poor, illiterate group. There is another example I would like to share with you. In this case, ethic violations were way more nuanced. You maybe already heard about the Milgram obedience studies. The participants in this study were told that they will act as a teachers and another participant will be a learner. A participant's task in a teacher's role was to punish another participant who was a learner when they do any mistake in a learning task. The teacher could not see the learner, but they can hear them. As the experiment begins, the learner starts to make mistakes, and you were told by experimenter to punish the learner with the electroshock. You started with a low voltage, but with each mistake learner does, you have to increase the voltage. At some point, the learner will start to complain that the electroshock has started to be very painful. After that, learner will start to scream, and in the very last moment, we will stop hearing from the learner. The teacher was not even sure that the learner was still conscious. Of course, now you know that the learner was not another participant, it was an actor, and the learner has not received any electrical voltage. But for the participant who was a teacher, everything was real. The shocking results of this experiment that almost all of the participants, with exclusion of 3, administered at least some electric shock voltage to another participant, and 65% of the participants administered a deadly voltage of the electroshock to the learner. The fulfilling of this instruction was not easy for the participants. Let me read Milgram's observation. I observed a mature and initially poised businessman enter the laboratory, smiling and confident. Within 20 minutes, he was reduced to a twitching, nervous wreck, who was rapidly approaching a point of nervous collapse. He constantly pulled on his earlobe and twisted his hands. At one point, he pushed his fist into his forehead and muttered, "Oh God, let's stop it." And yet he continued to respond to every word of the experimenter and obeyed to the very end. After the experiment, participants met the learner. They shook hands and saw the learner being healthy, smiling, and unharmed. But in order to avoid influencing potential future participants, subjects never know that the learner wasn't another participant and did not receive any shock. In this case, it is difficult to decide, was the potential risk to participants and the value of the knowledge gained balanced? This question, was it worth it, is not that easy to answer because different groups receive the benefits and bear the risks. Researchers must act responsibly and with integrity. Participants should be able to trust that researchers are being truthful, not withholding any important information, and will keep their promises. And researcher must conduct their research in a way that maximizes the benefit and reduce the risks. In today's psychology, it is usual for participants not experience more risk in the study than in their everyday life. Researchers must conduct their research in a just manner. That means that they should treat their participants fairly. One example is to provide the participants with a fair compensation for their time and effort. Another possibility will be if subject is participated in some treatment study or a training study, and the treatment or training are being proved to be effective, then the participants from the control group will be able to participate and try the treatment or the training. A sad reality is that members of some group, for example, ethnic minorities, disabled people, or queer, are getting more risk in unjust research activities. You can Google about the study I was citing here. A member of indigenous community willingly participated in one study but was unaware that he was also participated in another one. No study should be conducted without debriefing the participants. Each study should be conducted with a subject autonomy in mind. Each subject should get the full information about the study, its research questions, and the procedure. If the study is being conducted on the subject that cannot give an informed consent, for example, children, Then their legal guardian should give the informed consent for them. Researcher should answer all the questions of the subject. If subject knowledge would harm the research results, then the researcher should point that this knowledge will be available after the procedure. The research should respect subject's privacy, meaning that at the very least, subject information should be confidential. Ideally, participants should stay anonymous. Moral principles changed with the development of the society. No wonder that with the time, different ethical codes were invented and refined. One of the earliest ethic codes was the Nuremberg Code. It was created after the world get know about the cruelty of Nazi regime and Nazi scientific researchers. Almost 20 years later, the Declaration of Helsinki got created. It contained the same 10 principles of Nuremberg Code, but also added a written protocol that should be examined by external committee. In the US, after the Tuskegee study, a set of guidelines called Belmont Report was created. The psychology, we usually use APA Ethic Code as a guideline for our studies. APA have 150 ethical standards for both research and clinical practices. I would advise you to read APA Ethic Code for Standard 8, Research and Publication. All the modern research in North America in psychology follows those APA recommendations. McEwan University is no exception in that. When conducting your own study, even the smallest one, for example, for a course, for independent study, or a bigger one, for bachelor honors, you have to follow APA Ethic Code. But try also not just follow it, but actively think about how your study can be conducted more ethically. Think about how can you minimize risks for the participants. Do you have to use any deception? And if yes, try to minimize the usage of it. Weigh risks and benefits of your study and try to create a study when the group that bears risk will also be the main beneficiary from the study. Always follow the debriefing and informed consent procedure, even if your participants are your fellow students. Do not conduct any study that was not approved by ethical board.